Yet I've also been right there in that room off the chancel with men when they came to be married. And the groom is sweating in his tuxedo and trying to straighten his bow tie with his brother next to him and his best friend from high school and his uncle. And he's seconds away from a lifelong commitment that he's been thinking about in some ways all of his life. And we stop and say a prayer of thank you. And I've been there when a mother gave birth after the doctors told her that she would never be able to have a child. And I've been blessed to stand up here with that couple when they brought that baby, which was to them more than a blessing. It was a miracle. And they brought that child onto this chancel so that we could name her and bless her and welcome her into this community of love. I've also been blessed to watch a daughter take a wet sponge and dampen her elderly mother's lips as her mother lay dying in bed in the home where she grew up. There in the same home where that same mother many years earlier used to take a napkin and moisten it with her spit and wipe the dried applesauce off her daughter's cheek. And I watched as the tears came streaming down the daughter's face when her mom finally slipped from time into eternity. And she found herself suddenly sitting in that house feeling like an orphan. You see, I've been there during incredible moments when a baby was born and survived for only a few precious hours and then died in its father's hands. I've been in a hospital room praying with a wife and her children when there was an accident and the husband was in a coma for days. And they didn't know if he'd survive, or even if he did, if he'd ever recognize them again. And I've been blessed to watch him wake up and regain his memory and his strength and his vitality. I've been called to come to an apartment building when a congregant had barricaded herself in the front office in the midst of a psychotic episode. And I was blessed to be able to help her to feel safe enough to get into the ambulance with the ambulance drivers to go where she needed to go in order to get help. And I was blessed to be there, asked to be there by an adult son who had to tell his parents, who he loves with all his heart, that he's gay. And he's trembling inside because he wasn't sure if they'd still love him in the same way. And I've been there when two parents found their son hanging lifeless from a tree in the woods behind their backyard. As a minister of this church, I'm blessed to be there in times that are beautiful and in times that are pretty tough. And so when we say that love is the spirit of this church, it's not some mamby-pamby, let's hold hands, kumbaya kind of love. It's a courage-creating, hope-hearkening, sacrifice-stirring kind of love. A love that seeks to bind up the brokenhearted. A love that seeks to pour out an oil of gladness upon all those afflicted and all those who mourn. That kind of love. A love that begins at home, but a love that wouldn't even think for a minute of stopping at the walls of the church. That kind of love. It's a love that doesn't sit satisfied with the poverty level or the poor state of public education, the hunger, the homelessness, or the homicide rate. It's that kind of love. It's a love that takes seriously reality and history and mortality. A love that takes seriously what a Palestinian Jew from the first century named Jesus said. That what you do for the least of these, you've done unto me. It's a love that can endure bitterness and despair without resorting to self-deception or self-defeat. It's that kind of love. When we talk about what it means to be human and to live in this world, it means tears of sorrow and tears of joy. It means tears of affection and tears of affliction. And if we try to build a tower to heaven, to try to become like God's, to deny our humanity, to deny our mortality, to deny this world's insanity, who are we kidding? It might be tempting, but it's not living, and it's not honest. It's not real. And it's not what the wise and the good have long ago discovered and taught us. A church has a lot of responsibilities, but most importantly, it is to grow people's souls. That's what Pastor David's choir program, even though they teach excellence in music, the main purpose is to grow young people's souls. You know, we need to have all this gang violence that we're reading about in the newspapers, hearing about people who we're connected to being killed. We need to have a gang right here that's a lot more attractive and a lot more fun and a lot more meaningful, where young people want to come and be and share their lives. Be led by people like Pastor Smith, Reverend Davis, and many of you. What does it mean to grow a soul? It means giving people freedom to discover what they truly believe, not cramming something down their throat. It means learning to live with integrity and courage and character. It means helping people to become generous and to learn how to value people who are different. It means learning to sit with the discomfort, yours and others, without shrinking back. Growing a soul means learning to love, learning to say thank you, learning to trust and to be trustworthy. Growing a soul means learning to forgive when necessary and to say I'm sorry when appropriate. Learning to live an examined life, because that's the only life worth living. Now today, once again, we launch a stewardship drive to raise the funds to keep this church going. As you know, we give away what comes in our collection plate, so we count on each of us making a pledge and doing something to keep this church going. But I want to ask you first, not how, I don't want you to think, how much am I going to give? What am I going to do? What can I do? What else is going on in my life? I want to ask you, has your soul grown since you've become a part of this church? Are you a better person? Are you more able to open your heart? Are you more generous with your money and your time and your talent? Are you? Have you suffered a loss and continued to expand rather than contract? Are you living for something that you consider more important than yourself? Are you? Now, in preparation for this, I just get one time a year, I make a pitch from the pulpit to ask people for a pledge. So I've been watching these television preachers, see if I could learn anything about how to get people to loosen their wallets and become more generous. And, well, talk about babble. Talk about Bologna. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that if you give 10% to the church and follow the dictates of the Bible, that your life is going to be blessed and long and fruitful, because it's not true. We know it's not true. We've all heard of people who rob, cheat, steal, deal, skimp, pimp, and engage in all kinds of debauchery. And some of them live long lives with great wealth and great health. And we also know people who try extremely hard to do what's right and live with incredible courage and character and find themselves dealing with great suffering and great trauma. That's what's real.